and there's MVP expectations where you're concerned. How do you feel about those expectations?
Honestly, I don't believe I should be in MVP conversation this year.
How do you feel about all the attention that you've received with folks literally labeling you an MVP candidate before this season even began?
I think this season, I'm not playing very good.
Okay, so the cat is finally out of Luka's bag, and Luka has stated, or admitted rather, that he should not be in this year's conversation for the Most Valuable Player award. I cannot overstate just how much in agreement I am with Luka. Not only do I agree with Luka, but there are several other players that should be coming out and admitting to this as well. You see, while individual stats are amazing, as Luka is putting up amazing stats on the Dallas Mavericks, there's also one very important statistic that is missing from Luka's resume for this year, namely winning. That being said, however, if he's putting up better stats than the rest of the players in the league, should his winning record, or lack thereof, impact his chances of nabbing that MVP title? Consider this, that Stephen Curry's Golden State Warriors, despite not having a potent second option, is currently doing better than the Dallas Mavericks. Should Steph's higher win percentage, despite putting up less stats, make him more of an MVP candidate than Luka? What about player availability? Shouldn't that count for something? Alright, how about this? The most winningest team in the league is currently the Utah Jazz, with, as of this writing, a 21-5 record in the West, fresh off a win over the Giannis Antetokounmpo's Milwaukee Bucks. The best player on the Jazz is Donovan Mitchell, so does this make Mitchell the front runner for the MVP? Is it because Mitchell has a lot of help as opposed to Steph on the Golden State Warriors? What about Anthony Davis and LeBron James? Shouldn't this be a factor here then? All these are valid points to be made. In this video, I'll explore these a bit more along with my own particular take on the race for the MVP, its qualifications, and who the current top 5 front runners are. So without further ado, hey, what's happening everyone? This is Swish. If you're new to the channel and like the content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as it helps the channel a ton. Thanks and welcome to Swish Culture. Luka Doncic is quickly becoming one of the most polarizing players in the NBA. Ever since his debut in 2018, Luka has put up some incredible performances. Drafted 3rd overall by the Dallas Mavericks through a trade with the Atlanta Hawks, Doncic has been the most standout player of his draft, despite a very hard push by Trae Young, the player that he was actually traded for. Both players seem to have found their identities in the league and from a numbers standpoint are holding their own and seem to be doing very well. That's not all the two have in common, however, as the two play a very similar brand of basketball, separated only by the fact that Trae is 6'1" and Luka is 6'7". Both have been compared to past and current superstars. Both put up a lot of points and a lot of assists. However, with Doncic coming in with the height advantage, corrals a significant increase in the number of rebounds. But let's stop there with the direct comparisons, as we could go down an endless conga line as we try to get to the finish. While both Luka and Trae were in the same draft class and have a similar playstyle, Luka is in the conversation for the MVP race and Trae Young is nowhere close. So why is Luka even considered to be one of the most valuable players in this year's race if Trae Young isn't? He has a total of between 4 and 5 more rebounds than Trae per outing, which is the only major difference, and it's almost like he's in a completely different tier from Trae because of it. I mean, they both draw the same type of contact fouls that NBA fans love to hate. I personally am one of them. Another interesting thing to point out is that while both Trae and Luka made the All-Star game in their second year in the league, the fact of the matter is that Luka is in the MVP conversation and Trae Young is never mentioned. Why? You'd think there was some type of a moratorium on players 6'3" and under for some reason. Could it be that the admission of Trae into the MVP conversation mean that they are hugely overlooking another incredible player that regularly suits up in the blue and gold jerseys? Could just be me. Let me list a number of players that are making the rounds in MVP conversations this year. You have LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Luka Doncic, and LeBron James, and Stephen Curry, who was only recently considered to be in the running, having had to drag the Golden State Warriors by the keel to an above 500 record. There are so many arguments surrounding the eligibility of players for the MVP race, it's not even funny. Small ball is all the rage until the bigs start playing, and what we have this year are a ton of big players getting in on that small ball action. Small ball is actually a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't necessarily mean that the players are small, it just means that the player has guard skills. So if you thought small ball meant that your 5'8" behind is gonna get a starting spot on the championship squad, light one up for me too. Fact is, when you have players like Jokic and Embiid, true 7-footers who score at all three levels, play defense with a bit of passing in there, especially when it comes to Jokic, they basically become unstoppable. Take away one of these skills and add some athleticism, and you get Giannis, so these players are a mix of the best guard traits, biggie sized. You begin to understand why smaller players like Steph Curry are somewhat left at the wayside when it comes to the most valuable player. He starts off with a significant disadvantage. With that being said, we still have the question of why Luka Doncic is being given the nod in the MVP conversation, so let's do some fact checking. Luka felt he was snubbed when he was left out of the All-Star game his rookie year. In his second year, his mission was to right that wrong, and right he did. Not only did he make the All-Star team, Luka took the Dallas Mavericks with an injured Kristaps Porzingis to 6 games against a team heavily favored to be a title contender in the Los Angeles Clippers. While the Clippers didn't quite win the title and actually ended up getting knocked out in the second round unexpectedly by the Nuggets, that didn't change the fact that this was a huge accomplishment for such a young team as the Mavericks. Oh yeah, and the Mavericks also had the highest rated offense in league history. Just a side note. What raised hairs, brains, and hairbrains was Luka's massive 42-point debut against the Clippers, considered to be the toughest defensive team in the league. Luka then proceeded to take Game 2 of the series, however it was all but guaranteed to be a gentleman's sweep. All hell broke loose when Luka had a monster 43-point, 17 rebound, and 13 assist triple-double to end it with a dagger 3 that had the rest of the league in a tailspin. Luka is not just some kid, and given the smallest bit of room, will take the best of the best teams to the wire. The Clippers somehow managed to close out the series, but those Luka performances stayed fresh in the minds of viewers, especially when the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George duo got bounced by the Nuggets soon thereafter. Could there be some epic proportion of recency bias in the media that due to Curry's performance over 5 games with D'Lo, they chose to ignore Steph while heaping the praises on Luka? So fast forward to 2021, and despite the horrendous start to the season by the Dallas Mavericks, the media continues to highlight Luka as a top MVP candidate, with the babyface assassin nowhere in sight. Selection of the most valuable player is done through voting, so it is clearly not entirely performance-based and very subjective. This gives the mainstream analysts a ton of room to speculate on who should receive the Morris Podolov Trophy. Performances be damned. It also makes it very easy to follow a narrative, and there's this other narrative as well, and you guys know exactly what narrative I'm talking about.
He's 36 years old and still in his prime, playing more minutes than younger guys.
I mean, let's stop it with the nonsense. The bias is very evident in the media selections for the trophy this year, and the fact that ESPN panned the Warriors as a 14th seed should have Curry at the top of the MVP list for currently having this team above 500. Stephen Curry, despite putting up some of the best numbers, has a much more difficult time winning the MVP title than what is fair. Meanwhile, guys like LeBron and Luka and Jokic and Embiid and Anthony Davis and Giannis all seem to be given a handicap. So considering that this title will depend on individual performances, voting bias and winning record, and we've discussed the voting bias, let's take a look at individual performances. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that I didn't include Donovan Mitchell as being in the race for the MVP because the Utah Jazz have a very balanced team where the supporting cast has taken on much of the load, so superstar performances by Spida are not required. His per minute stats and overall workload pales in comparison to the rest of the players here. As you can see, I've taken all the top player performances, even threw in Trae Young just for good measure, and the numbers are very telling. On our first chart, the first thing we notice is that at the top we have Joel Embiid and at the bottom Anthony Davis. Now, what chart could have these two so far apart considering their roles on their respective teams? You see, these numbers are the player's impact points. The more a player impacts each game on average, the higher their impact points. This means that compared to what Embiid has to do on a nightly basis, Anthony Davis does not even come close. He actually falls well below Trae Young even on this list. Is that surprising? Steph is also smack in the middle of this chart, and we'll begin to dissect this here in a bit. From a pure individual statistical standpoint, Steph's production and workload is right up there with all the MVP candidates, ranked 5th overall. So let's kick this up a notch. What about winning record? Of these top players, Anthony Davis is just a really good second option and can't run by himself. So while a true definitive help for LeBron, these wins don't really mean much for Davis. This leaves LeBron, Embiid, Kawhi, Giannis, and KD. Again, Kawhi has a true second in Paul George, and that is also a bit debatable. So Steph again is right at the 5th or 6th spot depending on how you look at it regarding wins. Luka is the only player in the MVP conversation with a losing sub 500 record. Let that sink in. On our next chart, we get some very good perspective. One very important piece of helping your team win is your availability. If your team is winning without you, chances are you likely have a decent supporting cast. That said, if you're not playing, you get about as many MVP looks as I do. Here we see Steph, LeBron, and the Joker are the only 3 of these players who have played in every game their team has played so far this year. The worst offender in this regard is Kevin Durant, who played in 66% of games so far. I mean, should we rename this to the bench VP? Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard are also violators here as they've performed in 80 and 84% of their team's games so far respectively. And props to Luka and Giannis who've only missed 1 game. What this tells me is that due to absence, we can't seriously consider KD for the MVP at this time. It's easier to put up better stats when you get more rest. Joel Embiid, same problem. With missing so many games, you have to be right there with the team if you want to win that title and leading them all the way. Luka Doncic cannot be considered with a losing record and earns an automatic bump off the list for putting up empty stats. Anthony Davis is a second fiddle and doesn't even move the needle since he's not even the best player on his team. Davis is off the list. This leaves Giannis, Jokic, Stephen Curry, and LeBron James. LeBron with the best record and a ton of help. Giannis the highest individual stats, but not many wins despite having Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. Jokic dragging the Nuggets and Steph dragging the Warriors. I don't know how this looks to you, but in my opinion, the race for the MVP has Steph at least top 3, right up there with the Joker and Giannis. LeBron has too much help in my opinion as he doesn't have the workload of the other 3 guys I just mentioned and should be a solid 4th. Steph, Giannis, and Jokic are the 3 players putting up the most for their respective teams, and without voting bias, all 3 should be ahead of the pack when it comes to the considerations I mentioned in this video. So, what are your thoughts? Who do you have as your top 3 candidates for the MVP this year, and which of these so-called top players would you consider a fraud? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content. Till next time, swish.
A block so hard, sweetie get served. Call me Lonzo Ball, bitches get swerved. Usually I don't get down with these girls, but tonight it's on my mind, so I might eat these words. I just wanna